All right, greetings everybody, and welcome to week number 13. That is right, week number 13, 5, 10 plus 3. That is week number 13 of your 9489 class, which is your cultural heritage class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. J.S.K. Austin, and what we are going to do this week is a quick state of the course update. And then I am going to have my mega soapbox that I do pretty much every semester in this class, where I talk about that Confederate commemoration. Usually this soapbox, this huge soapbox that I do comes on the week of Confederate commemoration, or the Confederate commemoration module. However, we had a sync session this time around during the Confederate commemoration module, so it will be a week later. So we're going to do that state of the course update, and then after that, you're going to listen. If you continue listening to this video, you're going to listen to me talk about some things related to the Confederacy and Confederate commemoration. But let's get into that state of the course update. Let's go for that first. Let's X out some of these first of all. We are past the 20th as well. That was Easter. And so we are looking at, here's what's coming up now. Okay. So all that we have coming up now are 3 discussion board prompts, 1 for this week, 1 for next week, 1 for the week after that, and then your final paper. And if you did a heritage project, you will not have to do that final paper. So we will see how all of that goes with everybody. All right. So let's get into, let me say this. First of all, with this week's module, with the women in the women in commemoration and cultural heritage. Actually, let me grab a book first of all. So first of all, and this is one of the things that I want to stress right here. This is actually, you'll be watching the video from Dr. Russell, Dr. Alexandria Russell, and she did cultural heritage work around the commemoration of Black women, and this is the book that she published. One thing that I would like to kind of put on y'all's radar is support. When you have authors come in to do book talks, and you have authors at conferences, and we have friends and professional colleagues who do things like write book chapters or things like that, you're going to have that a lot when you are in the library profession. When you have colleagues or professional contacts that are publishing things and things of that nature, or you are hosting authors who are publishing things, try to buy their material. I understand that you're not going to be able to buy everything, especially, things get expensive. You may not be making a whole lot of money, blah, 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 blah. But try to support the best that you can. And so I definitely got a copy of Dr. Russell's book. Now, I will admit it was a little easier for me to get a copy of her book because I actually do have a professional development budget, and I can buy books with my professional development budget as long as those books are related either to the research that I do from Mizzou or for the courses that I teach. And this is a cultural heritage work. It's relevant to the cultural heritage class, which is why I'm showing it now. So I was able to get that paid for within my professional development budget, okay? So I will admit that made it a little easier for me, and not everybody will be able to benefit from that. But if you do have a professional development budget of some kind, then yes, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to use some of that in order to buy the work or research that your friends and colleagues do. All right. Another thing that I want to remind you all again, I did mention this before the sync session, but I'll mention it again. So the mini interview with a cultural heritage worker, that's going to be worth, that's already been done and was worth 5 points. Those have all been turned in. And so please make some time to go in and look at those, look at the work that your classmates did. And when you look at the work that your classmates did, you should be able to get a feel of what it's going to take for you to get one of those types of jobs. If you see a job within that, within those cultural heritage interviews, that is something that is interesting to you. Okay. So again, use that prompt as vocational guidance. And if you see something that tickles your fancy, then by all means read up on it and see what you have to do to get there yourself. Okay. Now, another thing that I just want to say really quick before I get into the Confederate commemoration and things like that, I do want to bring it back to this week's module just really quickly. So if we can go down to all right, so here we are, women in commemoration and other elements of cultural heritage. The commemoration of women and the celebration and recognition of women who play crucial roles in cultural heritage is, as one would likely guess, not where it should be. The module is in place. This module is in place to call awareness to some of the issues related to women in cultural heritage and heritage preservation. Additionally, this module is in place to help celebrate women who are doing heritage work and to encourage women to consider heritage work while assuring women that women's representation is needed. Okay. And so when I originally did this in 2020, when I originally did this interview with Dr. Alexandria Russell, there actually was not a women's module on cultural heritage and women. I had not made or created that module for the class yet. And then I kind of got the idea after I did this recording with Dr. Russell, and I wanted to keep the recording in the class. I was also realizing, hey, there is this dearth of cultural heritage commemoration of women, and yet most, I shouldn't say most, but probably most, and if not very close to half of cultural heritage workers are indeed women. So things need to change as far as how much we are commemorating women in cultural heritage and things like that. And so we've got some good readings here to kind of shed some light on these on this particular phenomenon, including we've got some one of the prompts actually revolves around some of these optional readings as well, or one of the optional readings, the Corbett optional readings. So that is something to be aware of as well. Okay, I think the DeVito reading is a different DeVito reading from the optional 2017. I think DeVito actually does have one in 2018, and I think I removed it because we lost access, and I forgot that there's a discussion board prompt centered around that. So let me see if I can get that particular thing back, that reading back, the 2018 DeVito reading, or if it is the 2017 one that's in your optional readings, then I will clarify that in an announcement and make a note of that. So sorry for any confusion there. Again, as you can see, there is a DeVito reading from 2017, but I think the 2018 DeVito reading, we lost access to it. And so, I'll figure all that out, and then I'll send an announcement later. So I apologize in advance for any confusion there, okay? But yes, I do want you all to be aware, first of all, be aware of how important cultural heritage and commemoration is. I think this Aja Wilson piece here really captures that well. And some other things to just be aware of is, again, this, even though I know that this is just kind of your a Wikipedia sort of thing, look at this and just look at how few elements there are there. No, of course, this is not an exhaustive list of everything from everywhere around the world. Of course it's not. But still, you would probably expect to see more than what you're seeing there, okay? All right, so I hope you all enjoy that unit and find that unit enlightening. Let me also make sure, because I had to change this link. Let me make sure that... Okay, I hate when things start getting caught up behind these paywalls. Hold on. Okay, I found a supplementary thing related to Aja Wilson and the statue, so I'm going to be posting that up. Man, I promise you, I've checked these links back in December or January before the class actually started, and that link was not behind the paywall when I checked it then, but it is now. So that is one of the unfortunate realities of when you put these classes together. That does not mean that links are going to stay active the entire time that the class is going. Okay. All right. But anyway, so I will add that supplementary link in, and from there, let's go into me just soapboxing a little bit about Confederate commemoration. Now, first of all, I do think that the Confederate commemoration, and you may want to take a break right now. So, I do hope you sped this up, but also take a break right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a break. Pause me, and then come back. Okay, now that you've unpaused, you've taken your break and everything. So one thing that I want to say when it comes to Confederate commemoration, first of all, is that Confederate commemoration really does, I think, does a great job of capturing an ethical dilemma or an ethical concern of when should we and when should we not commemorate people and commemorate movements and commemorate things like that. And what I would say is on the public dime, well, here, and there are going to be a few things in here, and this is largely my opinion, and so you don't have to agree with everything I'm saying. And in fact, you can get into the discussion board area to disagree if you want, or to agree if you want, or whatever you want to do. But one thing that I'm going to say about Confederate commemoration, and this is an issue that I've dealt with all my life, having grown up in North Carolina, and then also spending my teenage years in Richmond, Virginia, which was the former Confederate capital. So one good thing that comes out of looking at this Confederate commemoration question is that this really does deal with the ethics of who does and does not merit space in the public square, okay? Now, when you talk about Confederate commemoration, first of all, you're talking about people who, and I don't care about all this stuff that these Confederate sympathizers try to confuse people with when they say, oh, we were fighting for states, they were fighting for states' rights, they were fighting for this, they were fighting for that. They were fighting for the economy. They were fighting to keep people enslaved. It is really just that simple. And in fact, one thing that I would challenge you all to do is if you're around people who are trying to claim that Confederate commemoration is not about, or that the Civil War was not about slavery, here's what I would say. The states ceded due to slavery. Now, we can get into a debate, and I don't have time to get into this debate, but you can get into a debate as to whether or not the Civil War was actually fought due to slavery. But the southern states that did leave the Union, that ceded from the Union, they definitely ceded because of slavery. And what we are going to do right now is just very quickly look at the South Carolina secession document. South Carolina, for those of you who don't know, was the first state to secede. And their article of secession is here. This is an excerpt. Read the full document. I want to read the full document. All right. So, South Carolina. Let's just look for the word slave. And what you're going to see here is the word slave or slavery or slaves is mentioned 18 times in the secession document. Folks, when people try to tell you, again, people might be slick with words. And when people are slick with words, what they'll say is the Civil War was not fought over slavery. And whether or not the Civil War was fought over slavery, again, that is a debate, and that's a debate that I'm not going to have right now. But when you look at these secession documents of most of these states that seceded, including South Carolina, the first state to secede, you will see that slavery is mentioned a lot. And if you go through this, and what I'll do, I'll put this link right in the announcement. You can actually read this document, and if you read this document and come away from this document still saying that slavery was not the reason why South Carolina seceded from the Union, I am either going to question your reading comprehension or I am going to question your intellectual honesty, because this makes it very, very bold and very, very clear that South Carolina was seceding because of slavery and their fear that slavery would be abolished. Okay, so let's get that out of the way first. So we're talking about, when we talk about commemoration of the Confederacy, one reason why, and a lot of people who enter this library of science program are leftist people, liberal people, that sort of thing, and so that's great. So you don't really have a lot of people who are Confederate sympathizers that I end up teaching in this class. But when you talk about Confederate, excuse me, I got hiccups. When you talk about Confederate commemoration and talk about this Confederate commemoration being done on the government's dime, on the dime of the American taxpayer, one thing that I want you all to just kind of keep in mind is that the where is it? Excuse me, right here. Sorry, I got these hiccups. That's going to make things very, very oh God, very difficult for me for the rest of this video. I apologize. But yes, so here's the thing: the Confederacy actually waged war against the United States of America, and I want that to be clear. The Confederacy was not a legitimate part of the United States of America. the Confederate States of America, the Confederacy, actually waged war against the Union. They waged war against our country. And our country should not be, the taxpayers of our country should not be paying taxes to go toward the commemoration of people who made war against our country. It's just that simple. We should not be paying taxes to commemorate those who, who killed our soldiers. We should not be paying taxes to commemorate those who were, who did not want to be a part of our nation, even though they were already a part of our nation. Okay. So when we talk about this Confederate commemoration piece, that's the first thing that I want you all to be aware of. Is we can have discussions all day as to whether or not, if people own slaves, does that make them ineligible to be commemorated? Okay, and that's a big discussion, and that's a discussion that will affect a lot of even a lot of the founding fathers. You know, we know that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, James Madison owned slaves, George Washington owned slaves, John Adams was a huge anti-slavery figure for the early infancy of our country, and so forth and so on. Now, I will take a view, and a lot of people, so here's the thing, you really only hear some Black positions within the media. And the thing is, I talk to Black people all the time, but most of my students do not. Most of my students are not Black, and most of my students are not married to Black people, don't have Black families, yada, 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 the way that I do. And so I'm always talking to Black people, and so I've always got a number of voices and perspectives that I am exposed to when it comes to how Black people think and what they believe and that sort of thing. And what I've noticed is that a lot of my students in this program think that Black people have very limited ways of thinking because they don't engage Black people a lot. Most of the time when they're talking to Black people, it's a small number of Black people that they know. Excuse me, gosh. And then from there also, there's an issue with people mostly just getting their Black perspectives based on what Black people that they see on CNN or MSNBC or on the news, what those Black people are saying. They kind of take that as representative of the Black community and how the Black community thinks. And it's really not like that. So this is one of those situations. One of the things that I'm going to say is that Confederate commemoration, is something that's talked about within the Black community a lot. And then also commemoration of slave owners is something that's talked about within the Black community a lot. And the when it comes to people owning slaves and people owning Black slaves, one thing that I don't think the country realizes is that really Black people are kind of split. There's no consensus. Like if you were to go around asking Black people, should George Washington be commemorated? Should his name be on schools and things like that? Should schools be named after him? Should his face be on currency and so forth and so on? You can get a lot of questions. If you were to ask that question to Black people, you would actually get a lot of varied responses. You would get a lot of Black people who would say, well, no, he was a slave owner, so that disqualifies him. That is a moral evil. That is the ultimate moral evil. That disqualifies him from being commemorated. And you'll have Black people that will say, well, slave owning wasn't really considered bad at that point, or it wasn't really, the consensus wasn't that slave owning was considered bad back in those days, whereas now the consensus is that yes, owning slaves is considered bad. But that was not the case back then, okay? It was not a out of the mainstream view to own slaves. Slavery was a mainstream view back then, okay? And you'll see a lot of Black people who will say, well, hey, it was an accepted practice back then, so you can't blame a guy for engaging in a process that the mainstream found acceptable back then. Even if there were voices that were saying, hey, no, you shouldn't own slavery. Certainly there were abolitionists back then in George Washington's day. There were actually abolitionists going all the way back to the founding, at least to the founding of the Catholic Church. And that was, as you all know, centuries and centuries ago. So, gosh, these hiccups are ruining me. I'm sorry. So yes, when you talk about black people and whether or not they feel that slave owners should be commemorated, you really only see in the mainstream media, you see it normalized that black people feel that those who own slaves should not be commemorated. And that's actually not, it's not universally true. It's not a consensus. You will find black people all over the spectrum on that particular issue. Okay. Um, and so when we get into these debates and these discussions about, oh, well, the Confederate soldiers, the Confederate people, they were defending the Institute of Slavery, so that means that we should not commemorate them. I can tell you, as somebody, as a son of the South and somebody who grew up in the South, I can tell you that argument actually will not track but so far, because what a lot of these Southern sympathizers of the Confederacy will do is they will say such things, and I've had people do this to me. They'll say such things as, well, hey, you had slave owners on your currency, so if you don't like slave owners, please give me all of those pieces of currency that you have with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson on them, and ha 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 ha. First of all, it's really not that freaking funny, but also it's very predictable to come up with that response. But I would also say that that response does merit when you were talking about whether or not the Confederacy should have commemoration, especially commemoration on the public dime. That's one of the things that you're going to have to entertain, is people are going to bring up, well, there were people who owned slaves within the Union. There were people who owned slaves in Maryland and Delaware and Missouri, and those states did not secede from the Union. Okay. So it's actually better, if you're going to have this discussion about whether or not there should be a Confederate commemoration on the public dime, instead of focusing on the slave owner aspect, really, if you are against that, what you're going to really need to do is focus on the aspect that's being made here in this article, the fact that the Confederacy actually killed American soldiers. Excuse me. And if the Confederacy is killing American soldiers, if the Confederacy waged war against the American people, against the American military, then no, Americans should not be footing the bill for commemoration when, or the taxpayers should not be footing the bill for commemoration if the commemoration is for something that went against what the taxpayers are interested in, which is the well-being of our country. Okay, that's what we pay taxes for, is for the well-being of our country. At least that's why we pay federal taxes and state taxes, for the well-being of our states. And if you are paying those taxes, you should not be paying into a system that is going to commemorate the enemies of our country. Okay, so there's that. Give me one moment. These hiccups are killing me. Give me one moment here. All right, and so now what I want to do is kind of work this back to the ethics angle, and then I'm actually going to cut this short. I usually have like a 40-minute long speech just on like this Confederate commemoration thing, but I know you all don't want to listen to me struggle with these hiccups throughout a whole video, so I am going to wrap this up. But here's a point that I want to make before I wrap this up. So again, when we talk about these ethical considerations and that sort of thing, when it comes to the ethics, one argument that a lot of Confederate sympathizers like to make, and I try to nip this, I've heard this argument so many times, and it's such a stupid argument, and I want y'all to be prepared for how to respond to this argument, because I've learned how to respond to this argument, and if you are arguing with Confederate sympathizers, I want you to be able to respond to this argument as well, because it's a stupid argument that gets trotted out a lot. So when you talk to people who are defenders of Confederate commemoration, one thing that they love to say, especially to black people such as myself, who are descendant from people who were enslaved in the United States, one thing that these idiots love to say is, why does it bother you anyway? You don't know anybody who was a slave. They love saying that. They love saying, you never knew anyone who was a slave. All the slaves were dead by the time you were born. You never met anybody who was a slave. So why are you so bothered by this? Blah, 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 blah. They act like because I don't know the people who were enslaved, I don't have the right to feel an emotion about this. Now, here's what these, and this is straight up white supremacy, because I'm going to tell you very quickly and very easily how to rebut that argument. All it takes to rebut that argument is to mention to the people who said that, who say that they don't know anybody who was a Confederate soldier. They will get very emotional. I'm sure you all have seen, actually, let me play it for you in case you haven't seen it. Okay, and I'm going to have to make myself small for this. All right, hold on. All right, so yeah, I just want you all, and I apologize for the echo, but I just want you all to see just how emotional these people get.
Do you carry that flag? Because this is my heritage. My family fought to save their farm under this flag.
My family fought to save their farm under this flag. Who was working that farm?
They were poor. Do you know how much slave cost back then?
Who was working the farm? They were poor. Do you know how much a slave cost back then?
You carry that.
All right, so as you can see, this man is very emotional. He's very passionate. It's his heritage. His family fought for the Confederacy, even though they, whatever, his family fought and did something. But anyway, you can see how emotional he is. And he's so emotional that he's not even thinking straight. Because one thing you don't tell somebody is, do you know how much a slave cost back then? Like, that's a BS thing to say. But again, this guy is very emotional. So clearly he feels that he has the right to be emotional about his family and their heritage and their legacy and everything. But these types of people, now it's not this guy specifically, but his ilk, the people who agree with him and agree with his rhetoric and the types of things he say, they will tell black people very quickly, you don't know anybody who was a slave, so why do you get upset about this? Because I'm human too. Because I'm human too. Your white ancestors are not more important than my black ancestors. And the thing for me is that there's no disrespect. If you don't commemorate the Confederacy, there's no disrespect toward anybody who deserves more respect, right? So yeah, okay, if you don't commemorate the Confederacy, then there are Confederate people who don't get commemorated, and so they don't have that honor or whatever the case may be. No, first of all, quite frankly, you can commemorate them in some sort of museum or something like that. You can have a Confederacy museum or something like that and put that stuff in there, but it doesn't need to be in the public square where it's being funded, where the commemoration is being funded by taxpayer dollars. But the other thing that I'm going to say to that is that you don't have to tell me that, you don't have to tell me that there is a flaw in these people just basically not seeing the slaves even today as human. They're not seeing these black slaves as human because they can stand there with a straight face and be very emotional and be very passionate and say, hey, this matters. My white ancestors, they fought for the Confederacy and blah, 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 and this is my heritage and this matters. And they act like it matters when it comes to the white people and their feelings and what they did. But when it comes to the black people who were enslaved, who built this country while enslaved, they feel that there's no right for me and people like me to be upset in the face of this frankly anti-culture type of commemoration. All right, so yeah, if somebody ever asks you, like, if you are protesting Confederate commemoration and somebody comes to you and asks you, hey, why do you care? You never knew anyone who was a slave. Shoot it right back at them and ask them, why do they care? Because they don't know anybody who was a Confederate soldier, and that will get them spinning. It will get them spinning. It will get them in a tailspin. I have brought that to people a lot and never gotten a satisfactory answer, because there is no satisfactory answer. Once you put that out there, they start to realize, oh, I'm acting like these black humans are different from the white humans. And then, and then they want to kind of backtrack and get kind of out of that rhetoric. Okay. So yeah, that's something to just kind of have in your toolkit right there. But yeah, there's a lot of other stuff I could say. My hiccups are gone, but now my daughter, I just made her a plate for dinner. And so I got to join her. She's 4. So I'm going to have her eating dinner alone. I got to go join my daughter for dinner, but hey, this was a 30-minute check-in video, and I think I got my main points out, and I'll probably say a lot more in the discussion boards as I am grading your discussion board prompts related to last week in the Confederacy. Anyway, that is it. I am Dr. Jace, and yes, the Confederacy was, at least the states did cede because of slavery, and therefore they ceded because of race. Jace, race. All right. I've made my rhyme, and I will see you all next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.